welcome back to the NoScore Review Show, where we have in-depth critique and nuanced discussion of some of the latest movies, video games, and television. I'm your host, Nick Green, and today we will be doing a spoiler-free review of the hotly anticipated Dune Part 2, directed by Denis Villeneuve. This movie was delayed as part of the writers and actors strikes last year, so anticipation has only increased since its announcement and press cycles and all the news coming out about it. So yeah, it's finally here. Joining me for this review is Matt Schmidt. Welcome back to the show, Matt.
Hello. Pleasure to have me.
Pleasure to have you. Thanks for coming back onto the show. I think this should be your
Always
first
a
one. I've
pleasure.
only done like 3 so far this year.
Yep, it is for sure.
What a way to start this year. My goodness. We got to go see
Lord Almighty.
this together. We got to go to the early fan screening for our market, and yeah, I would say it delivered. Like I said, it'll be a spoiler-free review, so we'll really only be going into our general thoughts of the film overall. We'll be avoiding all kind of explicit plot details going in, but I will say, as kind of a general spoiler warning, we might be going into details from part 1. So if you haven't seen part 1 still, and you don't want to be spoiled at all, then maybe just come back to this review afterwards, and definitely go check part 1 out, because man, we got to rewatch that earlier this year as well, and man, just again, like, Villeneuve does not miss, I don't think. So yeah, those are our spoiler warnings out of the way. We'll be going into our general thoughts, kind of our expectations going into part 2. And yeah, with that, Matt, please kick things off for us. What were your kind of thoughts and feelings going into part 2? I know there was excitement. I know
I
that.
mean, there's definitely excitement. Denis has been one of my favorite filmmakers since I saw Prisoners in theaters back when I was in high school, and I followed him very closely since then. And I have never been disappointed by any of his films. And I think there were very high expectations going into the first Dune, and maybe some of them were not quite met. There were a few like iffy, maybe moments of CG, and and it did feel like a very much a part 1 that left you wanting more, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when you're seeing the first movie in a series and then you have to wait years, it's a little frustrating. But with Dune Part 2, I think his track record has shown that he's a very capable filmmaker. And
Yeah.
I don't think there was a single doubt in my mind that it wasn't going to live up to the expectations. And he said himself that he liked the film better than the first one. And he already was very satisfied with his original vision. So I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of faith in him going into it, and it delivered. It was exactly what I expected it to be and what I wanted it to be and what it needed to be, and it did everything so well. On a technical scale, it's amazing. There, on a narrative scale, it subverts a lot of things, a lot of expectations set up by the first that maybe some people were not happy about, and now when they see the final second half, it can sort of be like oh shit, they really went in a different direction here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, but I was completely satisfied, and sure, again, where it's kind of blue balling you, I'm sure a lot of people know already that Dune Messiah has already been essentially greenlit, so there will be a trilogy, and
Mm-hmm.
we probably won't get that for a while. But I think as far as middle movies go, Dune Part 2 holds up pretty damn well as a middle movie.
Yeah, I would have to say there's enough, because even like personally, from my feelings on part 1 at least, um I definitely understood a lot of the qualms with the part onedness of it all, but I didn't feel super dissatisfied leaving the theater. and maybe it was just more that kind of already expectation of like, okay, this is where we're leaving it, or like we're putting a pin in it, and we'll pick it up in a few years. So maybe that's more just where my head was at coming out of it. So I wasn't necessarily that disappointed. Um, Rewatching it, I only found more like fascination with that film and
I
more
agree.
satisfaction. Um, I was able to kind of pick up, like, I think we discussed it a tiny bit when we came out of our rewatch for part one. Uh, it's it's so unapologetic in its world building and commitment to only really explaining things you need to know and explaining them to the extent that you need to know them. It's still building up that kind of mystery uh, and the whole just the kind of gravitas of this entire universe that we're stepping into. And I think it really works in its benefit to, because like a little bit of mystery really lends itself to world building as a whole. You don't need to like stop and pause and be like, okay, this is what this means for like five
Yeah,
minutes, right?
exactly.
Um, Weirdly, I find myself and like all the hype that we've given these films in the last couple years, talking with each other, I still find myself comparing them a lot to the Avatar movies, and I find that like James Cameron's first two Avatars feel like a much more layman's version of the Dune movies. They're just like they dial up that like kind of turn your brain off popcorn action
Yeah.
blockbuster. This one's a little bit more cerebral and a little bit more character focused.
I mean,
Um,
Avatar is definitely geared more towards children, whereas Dune is
yeah,
very much an adult contemporary
for sure.
sci-fi story.
Yeah, it's just very interesting, kind of seeing the parallels in like the stories and characters and like archetypes and everything come up. Um, but yeah, I came out of part one reinvigorated for like my excitement for part two. Part two, I was like generally looking forward to last year, and then just kind of fell off the radar because of like the strikes and everything delaying it.
Hmm.
So I was just kind of like, okay, it'll come when it's ready. um, but man, like I mean that re-release really did wonders for like my hype going into this. I really tried to temper my expectations with all of the like media
Yeah.
like coverage and everything. I really tried to like keep the buzzwords out of my head with like you might have seen it as well, like Christopher Nolan's comments on uh like Doom Part 2
I
and
didn't actually
everything.
see those. What did he say about it?
He equated it, well, one of the things anyway, I saw one. He
He's
like
like, it's
equated
almost
it.
as good as Oppenheimer.
It wouldn't surprise me, honestly. But no, it was more he just equated it to this is like the modern generation's Empire Strikes Back. So, or
Could
the
be.
current generation, I should say. So like buzzwordy stuff like that, I really tried to uh ignore and just keep out of my head, just because like that does nothing for me personally as a moviegoer except heighten my expectations and like excitement, which like those things are fine to have, but like it's still, I think for me anyway, uh part of a healthy relationship of going to movies and kind of like keeping expectations realistic and also just hoping for the best out of every movie. I tried to do that with even Madam Web, but to no avail on that front. Uh,
I don't
but I
think
want to do that with
much could be
every
done
film
about
as
that
much
one.
as I could. Yeah, totally. Um, but yeah, as far as like sticking the landing, I mean, I'm very much in the same camp. I mentioned this to you, like as we left the theater. It just really makes you appreciate that cohesive vision and that like commitment to the director's vision that really sets these types of films apart from others like it. It is like another thing because you kind of brought up how satisfied Denis was with this like version of the film, and in the kind of landscape of director's cuts and everything. really getting a lot of hype and excitement and coverage and everything. Uh, it's really refreshing to see, like, the thing that makes it to theaters is what the director wanted.
Yeah.
And I think if we get more of like Dune, I think it would be cool if there was something akin to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy where we get an extended version and it's not necessarily like a different better version, it's just more good stuff, you know.
Yeah. Because he
uh,
said there was a shit ton of stuff that was cut from the first movie.
yeah.
And I imagine there is a similar amount in this.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, even though like Peter Jackson also says that the theatrical versions are essentially his
Well,
versions,
yeah.
they definitely could make an extended version, and there will be an audience for that, and
Yeah,
it will be watched, and it will make money if they decide to revisit. And the only, I guess, real issue would be all of the extra CG work that they would have to do on all
sure.
of the new footage, which would,
Hmm.
I'm sure, cost a lot more to do this than it would have been to do the Lord of the Rings stuff.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you never
for sure.
know. Could
Well,
happen.
and I mean, also just kind of, I mean, Lord of the Rings was also a lot more like practical already from the get go, right?
Yeah.
So, just comparatively anyway, there'd be significantly less. But yeah, I don't know that I have much bad to say about this one. There were a lot of really captivating new kind of sequences, and like time spent with new characters, that were really interesting, and it builds upon this kind of mythos and these characters that they introduced in the first film. And like, I mean, everyone's saying part one's the setup, part two is the payoff, and like it's a lot of payoff in this movie, which I think is
Oh
part of
yeah.
what makes it feel so satisfying to watch.
Because
But
it's
it's
like
still,
it's what you've been waiting for after
yeah,
watching the first one, and then you watch this and you're like, yeah, that is what I wanted all along.
yeah.
You get the
Or
big
it does
explosions,
that,
the
but then
big
it's like, oh,
battles.
I didn't even realize this is what I wanted all this time,
Exactly,
right?
like the stuff on Gady Prime
Yeah.
with the ultraviolet
Hmm. Infrared.
light that they shot, the infrared. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, same thing, right?
Same thing. Yeah.
But God, that stuff was awesome.
That was very all of the Benny Gesserit stuff was fascinating to me, and
Yeah,
seeing
very
their plans
fascinating.
kind of unfold more was really interesting. Not what I was expecting at all. Um, all the stuff with like Paul's mom, um, was I did like I wasn't really sure where they were going to take her character going forward with part two,
Right.
and they like kind of alluded to it a little bit with visions in part one. But again, and I mean, again, this is something I've mentioned to you, I really have enjoyed the um kind of what would be the like right terminology, it's just kind of it still keeps you on your toes when it comes to like the vision stuff, that
Yeah,
it's
well, they put
not
in some like
revealing
red
everything.
herrings
Totally.
and stuff
Yeah.
in the first. And I mean, you even know that from the beginning when he's I forget the guy's name that he kills at the end of
Oh
part
yeah,
one,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but he has all those visions where he's like, "Oh, I'm going to learn the ways of the desert from this guy," and
Hmm.
then he ends up killing him, and that stuff doesn't happen. But it ends up sort of, he learns the way of the desert through killing him.
Hmm.
And then that trend kind of continues in the second, where the visions happen, but not quite the way that you're led to believe they're going to happen.
Yeah,
And I think those visions, especially in this one, the way that they cut them together, I think was even better in part two,
I think
with
I would
all of
agree. Yeah.
the crossfades and the red flares that would happen at the same time, that would really blend all the images together
Hmm.
and really seamlessly blend between present and then within Paul's mind. It was just such good editing. It's
Hmm.
just really top tier stuff. It's
Yeah.
going to be raking in Oscar nominations. And really, I mean, it was a crime that Denis didn't get director for part one. I'd hope that that means that they're just waiting for part two, similar to what they did with Return of the King.
Return of the King. Yeah.
and just like load them up with all the congratulatory Oscars at the end instead of, you know, doing it 3 times in a row.
Hmm.
But it's definitely deserved. I mean, I can't think of any other more realized artistic vision at this kind of scale other than maybe Avatar 2, but even that was like nowhere near, I think, the level of quality that Dune Part 2 is.
Yeah.
It's just thematically and narratively, it's on a whole other level.
Hmm. I agree. And like talking about whole other level and kind of talking about like payoff in this film, like if one of your qualms with part one was the kind of lack of action, or you were kind of expecting more of a typical action blockbuster, part two is definitely leaning way harder into that. There's even more, like there's probably almost 2 to 3 times as much action and like big set pieces in this one. So
Yep.
that like I was well satiated throughout the whole film with that stuff. It kicks
Yeah.
off
They
really
start off
heavy.
real strong.
I loved that cliff top with the lasers, and like
Yeah, that was
it's
such a great tone setter for the
so
whole
cool.
movie.
Yeah,
Oh, and
agree.
the music when the guys start lifting off the ground. Oh my
Yeah.
god,
Oh,
it was just
and it's just
beyond
so
epic.
like visually interesting too. I mean, like the whole freaking world is, but like they've taken these sci-fi conventions that like that either like Frank Herbert was inspired by, or like that he helped set the precedent for, and just kind of like re-inject this whole new kind of spin on them after all these years, like
Yeah,
jetpacks. Like they're I haven't seen anything like this, like jetpacks done like this in any other sci-fi before.
yeah,
um and yeah, that's just like a microcosm of all of the other things that happen. But yeah, it really sticks the landing. There's so much like character work. There's a ton of action uh, implemented in this film. There's a lot of nice like um, returning character moments to kind of leave it vague as possible. Um, but yeah, I cannot recommend it enough. I'm contemplating going to see it again, just because, partially
yeah.
because I want to go see it in our newer IMAX theater um, with the better seats.
True.
So
Although I think that one has a bit smaller of a screen. Did you pick up
honestly,
on that?
yeah, comparatively, for sure, I would
It
say,
also just might be closer in Richmond as well.
yeah,
I think the screen
it's
is
a very
closer to you,
different
but
like auditorium. Like I think that one was actually more well suited, like the Richmond one was more well structured around the IMAX screen rather than, because I think what the Coquitlam one is it's just a regular AVX screen
yeah, but
retrofitted
they're
or
just
something.
playing the IMAX format on the
Hmm.
screen rather than
Something
it
like
being
that.
a different screen itself.
Yeah. But
But,
yeah,
you know, good leg room goes a long way.
exactly. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I am very satisfied. Definitely want to rewatch it again, and I am excited to see how this does at the box office, how it does with like awards for next year. That's a long ways away, but we'll focus on box office for now. Matt, do you have any
Yeah.
other closing thoughts before we wrap this puppy up?
My only thought is, you know what? Could have been longer.
Yeah.
I could have sat through 30 more minutes of that,
Hmm.
of just like giving, cuz it was so much more action heavy. I almost feel like there could have been a little bit more going on with
On the character front.
some of the character front, of just, you know, we follow for a lot of it Paul's journey, and I would love to have seen more stuff that is not centered around Paul, like when they leave the whatever the home base of the Fremen
Oh
is.
yeah, when they go south.
When they go south, I would have loved to have like another storyline happening still back there while they
Mm,
were gone,
okay.
and then just be able to even see more of the Harkonnens, I think, a little bit, a little bit more of that brotherly dynamic if we could have gotten
Yeah.
some more of
Yeah, that
that.
would have been good.
Um, but honestly, that's just like tiny little nitpicky stuff for the amount of juggling that they're trying to do narratively to get all of this book into just 2 movies,
Hmm.
and this one in particular trying to get it into like under 3 hours.
Yeah.
They're they're telling you what you need to know, and they're leaving a lot open to interpretation, and I can respect that. So
Hmm.
it's just something to hope that might come from an extended version.
Yeah. Yeah,
uh
I think one of my only
yeah,
nitpicks is also in that same vein of character work. I actually think I could have used more between uh Chani and Paul,
I
honestly,
agree with that too.
especially in
Yeah,
the kind of like I don't know how you say it and keep it vague, but towards like the back half of the film, how their relationship progresses.
yeah,
Uh, I think I would have liked to see more of that, but still completely understand why it is the way it is. So just nitpicky stuff at
yeah.
this
I
point.
think a lot of the nitpickiness that will come from people is sort of similar to what came with part one, where the story just goes in such a different direction than people expect.
Hmm.
So they are going to be thinking or like wanting the characters to be doing a certain thing that then doesn't happen because
Right.
they steer the story in a sort of a non-traditional way.
Hmm.
Uh, so I know a lot of people were like complaining about the whole white savior aspect
Mm.
of Dune Part One, and it's like, oh, you got the fucking Paul coming to this planet. He's gonna be the king of the indigenous tribes and everything. But watch Part Two, and then that'll kind of change a little bit, and you might reframe your way of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. It does very much. I like the other thing too. I'm very happy that we did watch it in close succession to part two, but I'm
Yeah,
also
me too.
still very excited to do an actual like back to back marathon and see
Yeah,
how it holds up, um, because it'll be
a
just a whole
super cut.
other. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think that's a good spot to end it. Um, Matt, thanks so much for joining me for this first review of yours for
Thank
2024.
you.
Where can the people find you?
The people can find me on Letterboxd at letterbox.com/wisdom nugget. And yeah, I'll see you there. I think I just hit 800 followers like yesterday or
Ooh,
today.
let's get this
So it
over
depends if they're all
1,000.
gonna. It depends if they're all gonna unfollow when they see that I don't follow them back, because half of the people that follow me are just for my Outwaters review that kind of went a little viral.
Wow.
Uh, and yeah, so
Excellent.
if I like the stuff you write, then I will follow you back. But I'm not a a follow
Follow
for
for
follow
follow.
kind of
Yeah,
person.
that's fair. And that's why he has yet to follow me.
Yeah.
Um, and speaking of following me, you can find me on all the socials as well at NoScore or at NoScore Reviews. You can stay tuned to the YouTube channel and wherever you're listening to this episode, whatever your favorite podcast listening service is. New episodes come up to those platforms for both the regular review show and the re-review show as well. If you didn't check out my re-review show episode of Dune Part One, that came out within the last couple weeks. So I'll be sure to tag that at the end of this video, maybe even put in the description down below, so you can go check out my thoughts on that as well. And yeah, what else? I've got some other movie reviews coming up soon. I don't know if I'll get around to the Fall Guy. Life is just kind of crazy right now. The first little, like maybe third of 2024 is going to be a bit of a whirlwind in terms of the review show, but I will try to get some stuff out when I can. Bad Batch season 3 is currently out as of recording this review. It's doing its weekly episodes. I would really like to try and get a review out for that because I did enjoy the first 2 seasons of that. And then otherwise, yeah, it's going to be just kind of up in the air. So I won't promise too much right now, but be sure to stay tuned for more episodes. And yeah, until then, thank you all so much for watching and listening. And we will see you all in the next review. Bye bye.